So trying to, unravel all this and trying to put some meat on the bone and to understand where we're coming from. Many people in Pakistan have gone back to 47 and they've talked about partition and the whole issue of the military emerging in the 50s and how the whole civil society was skewed because, the military took over so early, how the Americans backed the military. A lot of people, of course, blame the Americans because they continue to back military dictatorships in Pakistan for many, many years. But I just go back in this book to the end of the Cold War. At the end of the Cold War, I think a lot of third world countries had very hard choices to make. And a lot of them made them very successfully. But the key to making a hard choice at the end of the Cold War was that your patron was no longer there, whether it was the United States or the Soviet Union. You had to stand up on your own feet. And not only that, you had to also then develop your economy, your political system, etc., to be more realistic, fit in with the world, and build trade and ties and links with your neighbors and set up alliances. So we see we see the expansion of the European Union, we see the expansion of ASEAN. In South Asia, we see absolutely very little emerging. And part of the problem was certainly Pakistan. And Pakistan's unwillingness to accept any kind of change. So in the 90s, which was a period of high optimism and growth in many parts of the world, we were faced with the military basically backing two covert wars. One was in Kashmir, which went on for a decade, and the other was backing the Taliban. And these two covert wars which have frankly given us this legacy that we're living with today. The legacy of extremism, intolerance, sectarianism, and this whole these foreign extremists, etc., who set up shop in Pakistan. And so the second major problem there was that the whole idea of national security had to change. You could not have, we had spent the whole of the Cold War as a garrison state, that the threat to us was India. We enlisted the help of the Americans in order to combat India, although that was never the American intention. And this concept of a garrison state was no longer relevant, post-Cold War. And instead of opening up the concept of national security to civilians, to the idea of developing an economy, education, and other such things, we remained under, if you like, the tutelage of a militarized definition of a national security state. And that is what persists even to this day. The third thing was obviously the involvement with the Taliban. And the involvement with the Taliban ended in catastrophe. It ended in 9/11 and the defeat of the Taliban, which led to years of, and it was like for the military for many years, and for the civilians who backed the military policy on this, it was almost as catastrophic as losing East Pakistan in 1971 when the country was divided in two. Because here, Pakistan had spent, first of all, Pakistan expected to receive a major dividend after the Soviets withdrew in 1989 and the collapse of the Afghan communist regime in 1992. There was no dividend. In fact, we and other neighboring countries helped fuel a civil war in Afghanistan. And so that dividend never paid off. And now we were expecting, the Taliban were on the verge of conquering Afghanistan. The Northern Alliance was about to be wiped out. Ahmed Shah Massoud had been assassinated. There was going to be a dividend to pay where interlocutors with the Taliban would then have to go through Pakistan, etc. And that was completely thwarted also by 9/11. So the irony of all this is that we have lost two major opportunities for playing the good guy in Afghanistan. We have enormous presence and clout and relationship with Afghans of all stripes. But you have to take the decision to play the good guy, the guy wanting to bring stability and peace and ethnic harmony inside Afghanistan. And unfortunately, that is not a role that we have played. And the idea that we can now have clout in Afghanistan comes at a time when Pakistan is at its weakest. Pakistan is facing a huge internal problem, partly because of this intervention in Afghanistan, Pakistan's own intervention in Afghanistan. So the irony of it is that these national security policies over the last 20 or 30 years have led to an incredible weakening of the state of Pakistan and the whole prosperity of the country and its relations with its neighboring states. The other part is that, of course, the threat from India, which there's still enormous mistrust, but there's one positive thing has happened in recent months, which has been a development of good relations with India. But again, the improvement of India's relationship with Pakistan has already hit what I consider the biggest roadblock of all. Nobody is going to move forward, and Indians are not going to move forward unless we are prepared to do something about the extremist groups who are in Punjab, particularly the groups such as Lashkar-e-Taiba, who carried out the Mumbai attack. So we are faced now with a double whammy. A whammy on the Afghan border, where we are faced with having Pakistani Taliban who are giving sanctuary to all these various groups, etc., and are really carrying out the job that Al-Qaeda was doing. The Arab component of Al-Qaeda was training foreign terrorists in the tribal areas of Pakistan. Today it is the Pakistani Taliban who are doing exactly the same thing. The hosts for the British or the German or the French extremists who want to go for training to the tribal areas are in fact the Pakistani Taliban. So we're facing this double whammy of the Pakistani Taliban and their allies on one border, and these extremist groups sitting on the other border, which are not presently facing they're not creating militant problems for Pakistan. The army and the intelligence agencies have them under some kind of control. But this is not a solution to the problem. First, it's not a solution because India is not going to move forward on resolving some of the very difficult political differences between India and Pakistan. And India is not going to move forward on things like major investment, pipelines, electricity, all the kinds of things that the two countries should be sharing with each other. So we have a major problem to deal with extremism and fundamentalism on both our borders, on the two component sides of our country. And as I said, not to speak of things like the insurgency in Balochistan and the problems in Karachi.